Hi everyone, welcome to the Coach's Journey podcast. It's me, Alex Whitton. I'm joined on this episode by Nishe Patel. Nishe brings over a decade of experience of coaching, but also a real immersion in learning across a range of different modalities. And so therefore, it's such a beautiful, wide-ranging conversation, not only from how we build trust with our clients, but also trust in ourselves, and even to trust our clients with our thinking and making the space for them to use it in their own way. Nishe really brings a curiosity about curiosity. We unpack some of the areas and ideas that are so essential to coaching, like the core competencies, but actually what do they mean and how do we truly embrace them and apply them? And all this for Nishe is part of her own ongoing journey towards becoming a master certified coach. And she really shares the experience of both accreditation, but the learning journey, both intellectually, but also embodied of kind of growth as a coach. But we start with Nishe's initial introduction to coaching and this magic moment. One question that brought her to tears in her own coaching training, and how that was the seed that led her to quit her job and to embark on this real range of training as she acquired a real breadth of tools that she brings to her coaching. And we talk about these trainings from neuro-linguistic programming to hypnosis and emotion-focused therapy, and the benefits of these different modalities allowing us to work with both the unconscious and the conscious mind. With Nishe's depth of experience, we explore what the evolution or the next evolution for coaching is. Of course, we therefore touch on AI, but we think about mentoring as well, how different people present coaching and its benefits and impacts. And importantly, we return to what are the principles that underpin the practice with an ever increasing reach and appeal. Another part of the conversation that really stood out to me as well is not only how Nishe's business has evolved and developed, but what she had to do in taking 5 weeks off for a knee operation she has, which she talks about, both in terms of how to prepare her clients and herself for that process and how to integrate back into picking up her business. And I think just a really fascinating aspect of running a coaching business that perhaps I'd not thought of before. In addition to this, she shares insights in creating the conditions for deep connection with our clients, how to strike the balance between reassurance and challenge, how we ensure our business enables the lifestyle we want to lead, and also those times when a coach needs to disappear for their clients to own their growth, and how we can let go of the need to know why and let go of that for our clients as well. It really feels like she brings that decade of wisdom, experience, and learning to this conversation. And it really feels like it captures the unfolding nature of both coaching and Nishe's growing coaching practice and the different layers of meaning she's discovering as well. So I really hope you enjoy the breadth, depth, and richness of this conversation with Nishe as much as I did. Nishe Patel, welcome to the Coach's Journey podcast.
Hi, Alex. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well. The sun is shining here in sort of northwest London. So yeah, can't complain at all.
It's made it down to the Kent coast as well. It is glorious down here, and it's very welcome after the winter we've had.
Yeah, absolutely. It feels like a lot of rain is finally evaporating, which is nice. And yeah, I'm so glad to have you on, Nishe, because I think we must have met 18 months ago now, when when we'll, I'm sure, get into your kind of MCC journey of accreditation, and I was fortunate enough to do some coaching with you. And I remember in that conversation, I think even before the first session, going, I just want to hear more about Nishe's journey into coaching and this whole MCC experience, the journey to that master certified coach. And yeah, then experiencing your work as well. I was like, this has not only been great as a client, but shown me so much more about what coaching can be. So very glad that we're here today and that the sun is shining. And
totally appreciate you inviting me on for this as well, and for volunteering to be my client through that process. It was a real pleasure to work with you at that time, and I'm looking forward to the conversation too.
Wonderful. And I'm sure we'll get into that process that you mentioned. But As we like to do on the podcast, where did you first come across this thing we call coaching, Nishi?
Gosh, it was quite a while ago, I would say. So probably more in my corporate days. Um, and so I worked with early careers individuals, whether they were grads, interns, apprentices, for their full life cycle. So all the way from recruitment, onboarding, program management, and offboarding. And in that program management piece, we recognize it's challenging for some people to make that shift into the workplace, but also to find their place and to find what they want to do. And it is a tough time because there's high expectations from these individuals as well. And so from time to time, they need that bit of extra support that I couldn't offer. And I didn't feel that I was skilled enough or capable enough to have those conversations. And so whenever I came across those individuals or those situations, there'd usually be someone within the team or someone would be able to refer me to a coach within the organization that would be willing to have a conversation with them. And that's the first time I really started to come across it. And it was just that some of the coaches I met just had this way about them, just the warmth they had. And you could just feel that they were good, caring people that were going to support the individuals I work with. So for me, that was probably the first route into noticing that coaching was there, even though I hadn't quite experienced it at that point.
And I'm curious, what did you know of coaching when you were kind of referring people to these coaches? Because it's a term that means so much for so many people.
Honestly, so little. It was almost like people say, "Oh, maybe coaching could help," and I'm like, "Cool, like let's have a go. Like whatever you're suggesting, let's see if they're up for it." And the people would come out of it like 2 or 3 sessions in, and they're talking to me differently. They're engaging differently. And I'm like, okay, I have no idea what happened, no clues of what that conversation was or what's going on, but I can see the difference. And for me, it was like a bit of magic, if I'm really honest. Like this person was weaving something, but I honestly didn't know what coaching was. And I probably didn't get to know what coaching was really until I was part way through my first training. So I'd done like short courses in coaching. That was more about asking questions or different perspectives and that sort of thing. But I didn't get the true felt sense of it until I was on my training program, and it was the third out of 5 modules. And the trainer asked for someone to do a demo and a bit of encouragement by my peers, and I agreed to do this demo. And I'm sat there, and we're in this almost horseshoe shape, with no desk in front of us. We're all standing on horseshoe. There's maybe between 25 and 30 people. Like it's a big group of people, and trainer at the front of the room, and I'm open to having some coaching. And they only asked some really, I think it was like, when we reflect on it, they only asked like different questions, but they were repetitive questions that they kept going to. And I think it was the third time they asked, the tears came, and I was like, oh, okay, wait a second. We're accessing something really deep within me, and they're not really doing anything, but I'm feeling that they're doing a lot. And there was just, you could almost hear a pin drop in that. It was that quiet for the entire group holding that space. And I went, okay, there's something different here. Something that it, I use the word magical, but it wasn't magical. It was just deep and connected. And I don't even think I knew that had those words put to it at that time. But that was my moment of change going, ah, maybe there's something really here that I want to invest in and I want to do more of.
And I'm curious, do you remember the questions that they were repeating?
Yeah, because I trained with this individual. I continued my training with them, and it was, what makes that important to you? So simple, right? And like even now, I've got some of that feeling that I had back then because it was we touched on some really deep stuff. But I also recognize I was ready for that. And through my experience as a coach, some people are willing to go there, but some people knock that question away as well. And it was just perfect, like timing, the environment, all my peers, my goodness, if they hadn't had that, held that space in the way that they did, I don't know if I would have gone there. And just, yeah, it was amazing, really amazing.
Mm. And I never thought of that question as well as, in some ways, an opportunity to think about where the coachee is and wants to go with the work. And because as you describe it, it really feels like the conditions were all there for you to do the journey and the work that you really wanted to do then, both with the group that was holding you. It almost feels like there was the coach, but everyone else as well was almost part of that process too.
Yeah, and I can't even imagine it differently if I'm really honest. But it's it's part of my thinking now is like recognizing more and more how important the environment is, how important where the coach is at, the coachee is at, the client is at, and the focus shifting from me as the coach and really so much around the conditions I create and the space that I offer and how I work with the individual where they're at. And it sounds so daft, doesn't it? Because that's the fundamentals of coaching. It's what you learn right from the beginning. But I feel so much more deeply connected, and I'm using that language again, but I feel it within myself more than what it was previously, which was a cognitive understanding. So I could do these things. I could go, oh, all right, I should give them a bit of space, or I should do this, or perhaps I will create this environment. But it's within me now, and it shows up in how I engage, I think. I'm still exploring it, if I'm really honest, but I feel different than when I was coaching previously.
Mhm. Mhm. What's standing up for me, Nish, is that idea of um, knowing how to coach and almost feeling how to coach, and then potentially the same ideas, but one is perhaps more embodied and felt and experienced and therefore shared.
Yeah, and I know we'll get into this more, so feel free to redirect me as we go. But this links heavily into that MCC journey in that for me, the difference was not in, there was some things that I learned to do differently and there was a different knowledge base. But so much of that journey was who I am as a person and accessing different resources within me. And so I'll give you an example of this. A classic example is we're taught to be silent and to, create space for the other person to do their thinking and their explorations. And we can sit in that silence with them, but have this, and I've always talked about having this like energy within me and my brain's going 100 miles per hour. But what that MCC journey helped me access was a level of patience that I never knew existed within me. And that patience allowing me to sit within chaos that I exist within and can relate to that differently. And then that shows up differently in the space as well and encourages a different conversation. Now, on the surface, it might look the same for people, but the inner experience is so very different. And I do believe it then shows up in terms of the types of questions I ask, in terms of how I speak and I share and so forth. But that inner work I has been profound for me and has had a massive impact. And yeah, the patience one is a bit of a kicker that it took me this long to access it in some ways.
Mm. Mm. And as you say that, it sounds like it because the place from which you coach is different to maybe the place you were coaching from when you were doing this training course and early on in your coaching journey.
Yeah, and I think I think a lot of my early years of coaching, because the training that I had, and I went very quickly into NLP, um, my coaching was more directive and it was more focused on creating change and action orientation and that problem solving side of things. And I have to remind myself that even in that space, I did some really great work and my clients got some amazing results. It's just that I've just covered something else now. And so it's not to deny the beauty of that work because it is powerful, but I now have flexibility to step into something different and to have a different experience with my clients and to flex even more now that I can access these other resources within me.
Mhm. And I've written patience down as be curious to come back to that and mindful of going back a bit. But just on that, Nishi, you caught my excitement. And so I suppose, yeah, honoring both the great work you've done previously and I suppose the work you can do that's different now as a result of that inner work. I'm curious, is it a case that you kind of will dial up one or the other depending on the kind of context and the client? What does that now mean for the way you work?
Gosh, isn't that like the instinct within me is always a bit of an I don't know. Um, and that's more of I don't know if I can articulate it well enough. So I work with the person who's in front of me at that time, which means even if I've worked with that same client like a few days before, which some clients have coaching sessions that quickly, or a week or 2 or 3 weeks in between, the person in front of me is changing. Like they would have had different experiences between our sessions. They would have perhaps continued their thinking or something is going on within them. Like I will meet they are a new person each time in some ways. Like I've got some narrative about them, I've got some insight to who they are as a person. So when that happens, what we might have done previously might not be the right approach for them in this moment. And so it's sensing into who they are and then telling me what they want. So and this is quite relevant. I had a client this morning who has rescheduled to next week. And when they rescheduled, they dropped me a note afterwards and sort of went, "Hey, do you think we could do this differently? Can we, rather than me doing all the thinking, I'd like to hear more from you." And I'm like, "Okay, I guess we're doing that differently because although we've had a number of sessions together, they're now wanting something else because for whatever reason." And so in that conversation, there's a bit of the mentoring that might creep in if that's what they're wanting, but also I probably would dial up more of the exploratory MCC side with the questions afterwards than trying to do the pattern spotting that I might do more so with the NLP. It's integrated, it's interwoven. So I'm not necessarily cognitively going, right, because they've asked this, I'll now do this other technique or this other approach. But you're right, there'll be a shifting and rebalancing within me depending on what they're asking for and how they're showing up. And I don't know if I've articulated that well enough because I feel like I've been bouncing around that thinking. But how's that sounding in terms of your question?
Yeah, don't know if this catch it, but the image I have in my hand is it's like catching a ball in the
Mm.
um, how we catch is probably similar in that we'll use our hands, but the stance we're in when we're catching that ball isn't always going to be the same because the ball's not always thrown exactly the same to us. And also acknowledging there are definitely times where we might drop it, and it's then how we pick that up, and that could be I thought the ball was going to move this way, and actually it hasn't, and so now where do we go?
Yeah, I love that. And I guess the only other thing that popped into my head as you said that was, if we drop it, maybe we're not the ones that pick it up.
Mm,
And I don't know if that's a client coming into that, but like, if the ball drops, maybe we just look at it on the ground for a bit, and that's cool too. But it'll be what happens in the moment at that time that will determine what happens, rather than me going in there and going, oh, if the ball drops, this is what I might do. And that actually, sorry, I feel like I'm going to jump back a little bit here. In that, I remember when I first started coaching, when I was preparing for sessions, I would often go, right, I've been working with this client on this thing. We've been talking about this stuff. And we said that we might do this. So what might I use to help them do that? And let me review that. And let me think about the types of questions I might ask. And, there's a lot of prep that I used to put into it. Whereas now I'm just like, we'll just see. What will happen will happen. And I don't even know how this is going forward in any one moment. So I've just got to trust myself, I've got to trust them, I've got to trust the process, and know that both of us, it might not work for us, or it might work beautifully. We just don't know. And getting super comfortable with that side of things as well.
mm, yeah. Um, I'm just catching my instant curiosity to think about how that trust has evolved. Yeah, let's do that. We will come back to that journey and that training course. But yeah, how has that trust evolved? And obviously, we see that and how you maybe prepare for sessions now, Nishi. But yeah, what's that be?
Um, Gosh, it goes back to the inner work, isn't it? I think that's been part of everything all the way through. It's just shifted along the way. Early days when I started coaching, I had a lot of narratives, a lot of challenge of myself, a lot of negative thinking on myself and what I was capable of. Um, and that's built up from years and years. Um, but that trust in myself was hard won, really hard won. Um, and initially, when I was working with clients, I used to take on a lot in terms of, do they look happy with the outcome? Are they leaving and they wanting to have another conversation? And, measuring myself by these external measures a lot. And it was just this, have I done this well enough? And reflecting back and listening to my recordings. And there was just so much thinking about it. And that makes sense to a certain point, right? I'm learning a new skill, I'm developing as an individual. But I also remember that, and this must have been about 2 years in, I worked with a client who, because of the it was more on the NLP side, and we were doing more trauma-focused work. And I remember having worked with them for a period of time, and I left this one session and I carried on my day, and you know, didn't feel the need to, check in or anything. And I didn't realize I didn't have that need to like almost talk it out, to do something with it, until I came back to the notes, to just make sure I caught the key things for our next session. And it was like I wasn't carrying anything from them. And I don't know what led me to trust in myself or what shifted along the way. I haven't gone into that thinking, if I'm really honest, but I know the moment it changed. And I just started to go, okay, well, we'll do something. And if they don't like it or it's not right for them, actually, we both have a responsibility here. And perhaps I And perhaps it was me handing some of that responsibility back to them and not carrying it so much myself that it shifted. But uh, it was a moment in time that suddenly showed me that things were different. So I don't know what, do I know what built the trust? I can say a lot of the personal journey would have been, I think when I started coaching, I had a mood disorder. Um, Cyclothymia, we'd said it was, but like I think it was probably more the ADHD playing out. I had a lot of that negative self-talk that I had to work through. I was questioning my ability. I was someone who thought I couldn't listen. I wasn't good at listening. No, it's just my brain was just super active and I had these impulses to share. So there was just a lot of work on that stuff, and I did work on myself through that period. But yeah, that one moment of walking away, not carrying anything, that was the big shift for me.
And yeah, I think it really strikes me that there's a beauty in there, and we don't need to know what caused that moment, but that sometimes it can feel so small and subtle, but then shifts a lot, and then we can just carry that new way of being forward, which sounds like it was sort of a snowball that came over.
And I think it's true for our coaching clients, if I'm really honest. I was super lucky with a lot of the training I get, but I remember someone saying to me, I think I remember who it was, that it's not about us unpacking and understanding what created things. It's, almost in the work that we do, it doesn't necessarily matter what created it. We work with what is and how it's being experienced now and how we want what people want instead. And I recognize in coaching, there's a real risk and a tendency that we can get caught into understanding why things are the way they are because of the society we're in, and clients going, well, if I can understand it, then I can do something about it. And I'm like, and it's similar to that, right? It's, well, why were you spending so much time trying to understand it? Why don't we just go, well, this is what it is and carry on? And then when I've done that with clients and offered that and suggested, hey, is this like, what do we get out of that understanding? What would you want to instead? Sort of exploration. Just the surprise that they don't have to understand it, that they can just experience it and we can find a way forward from where we are is is amazing. And I think that's filtered through that experience as well. And my ongoing experience is that I don't need to get why it is the way it is. Just go, oh, well, that moment in time happened, or this thing happened, and here's the chain, and here's how we grow from here.
It reminds me of the what makes that important question as well, because sometimes, I mean, I've definitely been asked it by coaches before. Like, oh, it'd be really good to understand this. And they go, what makes that important? I'm like, nothing really. But also, sometimes you might start to tell while we've worked together as well. I like images, but it feels like that new way of being can sometimes feel like a shoot that's just popped up that we've not
Mhm.
necessarily realized was going to grow, and it can feel so fragile that perhaps understanding feels like the way that, oh, if I know this, I can better look after it. And actually, it's like, well, what's it just need now to tend to it if we want it to keep growing? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really beautiful. It just reminds me that how in society thinking is valued so much. And so it's really natural for people to get caught in their thinking, but you're right, like, how do we look after this thing? How do we keep it going? How do we grow from here? How do we take that awareness and utilize it perhaps to maybe find another seed that we want to grow, or another shoot that's coming through the ground? It's has, I think, more potential for the individual usually. And I say usually because I have met clients that when they understand it, suddenly the change happens. And so I don't want to dismiss this entire array of clients who are like, well, yeah, when I understand it, it's done. Um, but I've recognized that for a lot of people, that's not usually the case.
And it sounds like it's part of the coach's role is the curiosity of, and what might that give us with that understanding is you put earlier, and for some it's, though this would be really useful, and others I don't actually know. Yeah, and I'm noticing my the former history student in me being kind of curious about kind of picking up that training thread, Nishi. So you mentioned that's module 3 was that point at which you really went, and this is what coaching is. But what, and you said you've done a few kind of day trainings, workshops around like what, from referring people to coaches in work, what
Mm.
took you to becoming a coach?
And I smile a bit, I laugh at this because I'd been so intentional with my career for a very long time. Like I remember at uni looking at different options, exploring them, like say research, reading books on them, and really being quite intentional about each career decision. Coaching wasn't that for me. I was at the time contracting, and I was between contracts. I was wanting a permanent job. I was in process for a permanent job. But I was there going, well, look, if that doesn't happen, what's my backup plan here? And I had been more heavily on the recruitment program management side of things, and I wanted to make it across the learning development. And at that time, and I think it is common still now, that coaching could support that transition in some ways and invest in my development. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll go to those. And I think those in-person days and, a few hours, nearly an entire day where you're getting a bit of more insight to what coaching is and spending time with an organization. And I went to one. I only went to the Animas one, and I kind of went, well, yeah, that feels about right for me. And I'd looked at others online, but they hadn't connected, and I just sort of went, well, this feels fine, this feels good, and I left it. And as with many of these organisations, there's like a special offer for a limited period of time, and sort of thing. And I was deciding between the coaching program and waiting on this permanent role, because if I had the permanent role, I'd be traveling 2 hours each way in the beginning, and so trying to do a qualification, even though it was weekends, I still had to do the coaching practice. They just probably wouldn't work well together. Anyway, just as I was looking to make the decision, I got a call about the job, and they basically went, "We really like you. We've just had an internal applicant, and we need to interview them." And I was like, "Oh, well, there goes that. The internal applicant's going to get it." Um, and sort of had that deadline on, just saving myself a couple of £100. And when you're not working, that felt like a lot of money, right? And so I went, I'll just sign up to the course. And literally, like a few days after signing up to the course, I got the job offer. And I was sat there going, well, I guess you're doing both. And I feel like I fell into it because it was meant to be the approach that got me into a different part of my corporate career. But that experience in the training module shifted something within me and got me interested in continuing my learning. And so when the opportunity came up to do the NLP and hypnotherapy, so a very person-centered integrative course, I quit the job because to do that course, I would need to do face-to-face sessions, and that just was not going to happen whilst I was working in the permanent role. And I was like, right, if you're going to do this, you're going to commit to it. And it wasn't even that it took much to decide it. I think it just, I, tr- I think we talked about trust, didn't we? I somehow trusted myself and trusted my instinct. Maybe it was just the impulsivity that just went, oh, you'll just quit your job. I, it just felt right, and I did it. It probably was the impulsivity. I've got a very checkered corporate career where I've bounced around quite a lot. But that was the journey. So the NLP and hypnotherapy, I then, gosh, I've done so much training. It's a stupid amount. I did, then went into from a practitioner to a master practitioner with the same individual and their organization. And then, gosh, the NLP, I'm now an NLP trainer. I'm training EFT, matrix reimprinting, supervision, just totted it up recently because of the MCC stuff. I was like, how many hours have you actually done formal training? And it's sitting at around about 650 on the formal training courses, and obviously excluding all the other reading and all the rest of it. And I sort of went, oh, that'll be all those early courses. Because I also did a second training as a coach. So back in the day, you had different pathways to what we have now. And so I did an ACTP, which is similar to the current level twos with ICF. So having done the Analyst course, I did another coaching course as well. And I did lots of short courses. So I feel like I'm constantly in some form of learning and development, whether it's course or mentoring or something, if that's always going on. I feel like I've taken us off on a tangent again.
No, not at all, Nishe. And yeah, I'm curious. So all of that training over what time frame? So when abouts did, and it sounds like there was a lot at the start as well with Animus and that ACPT.
Yeah. I think the ACTV came a few years after Animas because I was thinking about my PCC at that point. And I could have gone down the mentoring route, but the ACTP, you essentially get evaluated as part of the program before you submit to ICF. And something that appealed about that, if I'm really honest. So let's see, I think that all happened from 2016 through to 2021. So about 5 or 6 year period. So much of that happened. I say that, but I think some must have happened in 22 or 23 as well. 23 was when I started the MCC journey. So it would have finished around 22. I'm just like clocking that going. It's not, you know what? It's on my CV. It's on it's on LinkedIn. The dates are there. But I know it's been a little while since I've been on a formal training course because I shifted across to the mentoring.
Yeah, but 5 years at least, by the sounds of it, of some ongoing formal training. And just for listeners, what is we talked a little bit about MCC, PCC. So ACC, PCC, MCC are the accreditation steps for the ICF, which is International Coach Federation. What does the ACTP stand for?
Accredited Coach Training Program.
Right.
And so ICF now have 3 levels of ACTP. Level 1 aligned to ACC, level 2 to PCC, level 3 to MCC. Previous to this way of operating, they had, find my acronyms, at ASTH. Please don't ask me what that stands for anymore because I can't even remember. But that was the training, but you didn't have the assessment element, the mentoring and assessment element within it. And you had the ACTP, which was I think the alternative. And I may have missed some others, but those are the ones I remember.
Yeah, no, thank you, Nishe. And so you quit your job to do the hypnotherapy and NLP course. Was that around 2016, 17? Because I'm assuming you'd have done Animas first.
Just. So I finished the Animas course, and I hadn't quite qualified there before I went to the NLP and hypnotherapy, and that was the beginning of 2017.
And what drew you to NLP and hypnotherapy? And actually, doubling down on my questions because I'm not coaching, so I'm question stack, which is a disclaimer I probably use too often now. But and I suppose also I'm mindful that hypnotherapy possibly has some connotations that are probably not apt, to the point that this is a long digression actually, but in a past life, some of the work I did was organising residentials at universities, and some of those providers don't allow you to practice hypnotherapy as part of their contracts to book their rooms, which seems a very specific, but perhaps feels like a vestige of our assumptions of what hypnotherapy is. So yeah, I suppose both what drew you to the NLP and hypnotherapy, and what actually is hypnotherapy.
Yeah. So what drew me to it was the trainer. So this had been a trainer on the Animas course. Uh, Obviously, a lot of respect for all the trainers on that course. They're amazing what they do, what they did then, what they do now. And I was really lucky to have such great trainers. And this trainer was offering the NLP and hypnotherapy. They train therapists and have run this course before, and there was an appeal to learn from them. I had a lot of ick feelings towards NLP. I was more interested in hypnotherapy in that it was like the course, there was something about hypnotherapy and accessing the unconscious mind and working with the unconscious that appealed, because obviously coaching is a more of a conscious practice, although I think there's space in there for the unconscious work as well. So at that time, that was the appeal, and I nearly didn't do it because of the ick towards the NLP. If I'm really honest,
What was the
just because anytime I'd come across it before, people had talked about it, it was always around the manipulative sales approach, and and it's so poorly done sometimes that I can hear that you're trying to get me to do this thing. Like, it was so poorly delivered, and that was something that put me off. What I'm really glad about is that I did do it, because I learned to, and the thing with the hypnotherapy was, I don't think I did, the therapeutic element was integrated all the way through the program. The hypno bit of it was the hypnosis and helping people access the unconscious mind. But I'll be really honest, when I think about the work that I do now, I think people have access to this stuff, and actually we can do that in a different way through the coaching approach. So it's rare that I use hypnosis anymore. It's there in my back pocket, but I haven't done hypnosis work for a very long time. And in fact, so I combine it more with EFT, use EFT as a hypnotic trance. Like, there's different ways of doing things. It's the NLP stuff that actually has been really powerful, I think, in terms of discovering pattern spotting, working with my clients differently. Um, and I don't know if people, when people come across NLP, we often think about it as a bunch of processes and structures and patterns. And it's how I learned it initially. But again, when I continued my training, I was really lucky in that my trainer said something to me that just took me down a very different route. Is she spoke about it being an approach to learning. And there's many different approaches in NLP. So there are really strong therapeutic work in NLP. There is the more sales side, there's the coaching side, and so forth. But NLP was built from therapies. It was a mapping of therapies and helping people to be able um, to demonstrate and deliver outcomes similar to what a therapist could do, but through a more linguistic, process structured approach. And so for me, what we often learn in NLP is the output of all the learning people did previously. And so if you see as a learning approach, something actually, like, I related to it differently. And I did a bit of a explore into NLP in the background of it, because I was like, okay, wait a second, now I'm interested here. Like, it was built in the 1970s. Bandel was in his 20s. Like, he was some guy at university that went, oh, I could do that. And, started using his, engaged an assistant professor in linguistics to go, well, could we do what Fritz Perls does? You're like, come on. And like, obviously, it's got these elements of like 1970s, 1980s, like woven into the practice because of where it was created and who created it. But that's true of any therapy or any practice. It's got this stuff within it because of who created it and when they pulled it together. And like you can even do that with transactional analysis and with Eric Byrne and who he was as a person when he did his observations that created some of these structures, right? When I start seeing not just NLP in all practices and sort of going, well, actually, there's someone's thinking or interpretation on something that they've structured in this way, actually, the structure bit of it can be loosened and go, well, what is it that they're doing here? What is it that they're hearing and what they're noticing? And what might I notice that's different? And so making it more my own through the years is kind of where I went with it. So I know you asked about the hypnotherapy, um, but the NLP is far more present in my practice now. Hypnotherapy was, for me, was a way of helping someone be in a state that they could do the processing work. And often, because of the combination of NLP and the way that I was taught, we used to do NLP process under hypnosis. Because hypnotherapies that I learned was more Ericksonian, which is part of NLP. So I think NLP is the strong part of my practice, if I'm really honest.
No. I was really drawn to what you said, Nishi, and this is where it's a test of can I read my own writing, but around all of these modalities in some ways being practices that have been structured in a certain way, and no doubt lots of overlaps, but thinking that that is equally true of coaching. And I don't know enough about it, and I don't know how clear the origins of coaching are. Obviously, we've got people like John Whitmore, but I think it's also often said offhand that coaching is far older than coaching is, and in the same way that many of these things are, it's just being repackaged in ways that are useful, but in noticing that they're in packages still, it's choosing what bits we want to take out of the package and how we hold them together. And I'm curious because I know that a lot of your work now is supervision and training, not only supervising coaches, mentoring coaches, but training mentors and supervisors and coaches as well. What you've noticed in the the development of coaches and people mastering that practice?
Um, so, gosh, this is where it gets I'm just thinking about how, again, to articulate this. There are commonalities that you would often see in people in terms of their want to get it right, to develop their skill, and want to ask the right question, all of this stuff right at the beginning. And this loosening the hold on this and then coming to realizations and seeing their client shift and starting to recognize that actually they don't have to be in the space as much and that they can step back and hand over more. There's the want for structure to know what they're doing and all of this stuff. And that's often the early stages as coaches develop, and the coaches I've been lucky enough to work with, they often it's them tripping themselves up. And they're inner drivers, their inner wants to support their clients, they're what's going on for them get in the way of their coaching skills. So I guess what I've discovered over time is the skill is very basic and very simple. And we like in most programs you train it within the first few sessions. Like it's not huge amounts. But a person's capacity to hold that, to do just the simplicity of coaching and to hold their own staff is often so much of the work. don't get me wrong, there's lenses we can look through, there's theories that we can learn that develop our ability to do some of this stuff. But actual coaching, pretty straightforward. It's the person's ability to accept that that's what it is sometimes. And that they don't really have to work that hard. And if you work too hard, it's probably your own staff. That's a huge generalization. Like, I recognize that because that's been my day, that I've worked too hard, and actually it's just me feeling that I need to do something to help this person. Um, I'm also discovering more around how we often help people in terms of theories and the practice and the doing of coaching. But even what I said earlier in terms of the shift within myself is showing me that the work is perhaps helping people more in that journey to discover what's shifting within themselves and how they relate to their clients and what they're doing, and really that inner work piece and helping them make those connections. And that's where I think I'm going more with my own development stuff that I want to do with coaches. And then inevitably, who you train with has a huge influence. And I and it's not just the school. So the ethos of school or the environment that you're in and the people you study with, but also your trainers. And one of the things that I try to convince people of is that I don't know all this stuff, and you're receiving these theories and the ideas through my filters, and it's important to challenge and question what you're hearing from me. And there might be times when we disagree or we might hold things differently, but that's okay to hold these ideas differently. Um, it's not about replicating what I do. Like, if there's stuff that I do that you like, cool, take that on, make it your own. Like, still my questions, my ways of doing things. But it's not about doing coaching as I do it. It's the journey that you go on to become the coach that you are. And it's like really early on, I'm in training, but they often, I know they've kind of got it usually a few modules in when they actually question and challenge me. And they tell me that they disagree or they see it differently or they have this other theory that goes against it. I'm like, cool, yeah, I've still got this theory and I've got my perspective, but yours can very much exist in this space too. And how do we now use this? Or do we use this at all? Or do we just simply accept it as just another perspective? But I think I'm recognizing the influence I've had and wanting to make sure that whoever I work with they don't attach to my way of coaching, that they just see as one approach of many, many out there.
Mm. And it feels like it's that delicate balance, isn't it, of as you become a coach, knowing what coaching is and how simple it is, but then also making it your own. It's that sort of freedom within a framework is a phrase I quite like. And I'm also thinking that it's really difficult too to, or can be discomforting to realize how powerful something can be and it also be so simple.
Yeah, and it's yeah, it, and I think that's the power is in almost the simplicity of it. Um, and I've been working on, like, how do I see it? Well, how do I want my clients to feel? And not in that I want them to feel a certain thing, but how they relate to me in some ways. And maybe I shouldn't want that at all. But part of me as a coach feels that I'm doing my best work when I'm redundant to the client or I disappear from the space. And as much as it can be so frustrating when a client comes to a session, they're like, oh my gosh, I made this amazing progress. It was because I read this article. I spoke to this person. You're like, we've been working on that for months. And it's something else that happened. But the great joy of it is that they haven't attached it to me. And that they were so in their own explorations, own discoveries, that I am a passing thought to them. And it's it's a double-edged sword, right? Like I love the acknowledgements and the recognition and so forth. But at the same time, I am deeply rewarded when a client doesn't see anything from me, even though I know we've done the work.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a really interesting thing that it makes me think that I imagine most people get into coaching to help and enable other people. Um, and the natural one is also then to know that you're helping, and then how you hold the fact that we might be witnessing the transformation that someone really wants, and almost feeling like an observer alongside them, and how to hold that, basically, that detachment from it. And how have you found that, Nishi? And I say that because I can imagine that coaching can feel really addictive for feeling like you're making a really big contribution. And I also know when it can feel really uncomfortable when there's someone who goes, "Oh, this is like, you've done a great job here in help," like, and even ascribing the solutions that they've come up with to you. It's like, "Oh, thanks for giving me this." And it's like, I didn't do anything. But there's this really interesting tension because, I mean, from an ego perspective, that can be really nice because you're like, "Oh, yeah, and this is validating the thing I'm doing." But actually, you potentially risk having none of that. But also, it really is the value of the work to for them to feel like you weren't even there.
Yeah, and it's the word that caught my attention was when you said detachment. And I was like, it's a detachment from what they achieve. It is, but there is I don't know if attachments, I go back to the word connection, and between coach and client is still very strong in there. And you're right, clients will still attribute things to me in our conversation. And over time, I've gotten better to go rather than just sort of going, yeah, but you did that work and you did that thing, and sort of go, wait a second here. Why is that what I did and not what you did? And getting stronger at going into that coaching space to help them discover everything they did and empower them even further and to deepen their awareness of themselves and what they have been responsible for. And, it's almost it's so easy for us as a person when someone says, "Oh, I don't know if I can," and we go, "Oh, yeah, I'm sure you can. You're gonna be amazing." Whereas being in that coach going, "What's telling you don't know you can?" And putting our own needs aside to really help that person step into everything they can be. Because boy, oh boy, when I've got clients crying or they're saying these things to me, I'm wanting to reassure them and wanting to make it okay for them. And sometimes I will offer them some of that and invite them to keep doing their thinking. And I think before, like in my early days of practice, I did do that second bit of it as much. I was sure them almost knocking away the experience that they were having in that moment. Whereas actually now it's like the experience they're having at the moment with me is all we have. Mm, I don't know where they'll go with this. And what if my reassurance stops them actually doing the stuff that they feel that will make a difference to them because I've said it's okay. And so again, noticing the influence that as a coach I have with my clients in the same way the influence I have with coaches in training or my supervisees or my mentees. And it all harks back to, someone saying to me a very long time ago, she's becoming more and more aware of the influence she has and, like, almost putting herself out of the space. And I'm like going, "Oh, no. No, I'm recognizing the influence I have, and I'm staying in the space with them. I'm still partnering with them, and I'm being there for them. I'm just checking myself more." And I've just got a different way of doing this. And I'm sure there'll be people who listen to this going, oh, no, you should be stepping out of the space. We'll just do it differently. Their way of doing it's not my way. My way is not theirs. Their I did try it their way. It just didn't work for me at all. I just felt like I felt robotic in some ways. Um, but I do have to monitor this. I've got to be really careful because it's so easy to go, I've got you. I'll take the weight of that. Don't you worry. And almost limit what they can achieve as the client.
Mm. What stands out for me there is that like awareness of when you said that's not for me, the awareness of what feels right for us as coaches, but also therefore knowing the influence that that can have, and so we can be mindful of it. And it also feels like it comes back to trust.
Yeah. And I'll say one more thing about the trust bit. I will probably say more, I'm sure. But I I go into these conversations now going, the person I'm with or the people I'm with are more capable than I can ever know. And so if I'm ever holding myself back or I'm resisting, I'm like, no, wait a second, that's not my decision. It is their choice. And if I'm holding back, perhaps I should explain to them or give them the sense of what's going on for me and why I feel like I'm holding back, and to invite them to choose if they what they want to do with that, and if they do want some of my other thinking or they do want that stuff, because they have not had the opportunity to choose. And so there's something about trusting them with my thinking in the same way they trust me with theirs. And I think that's part of that MCC journey was like just being so much more open with people. Um, because they can see if I'm thinking, they can see something's caught my attention. Like this face gives everything away. Like it's not hiding anything, right? And so all I'm doing is drawing their attention to what might be going in my head without giving them any access to it. And so I'm I've learned to just go, let's just be more open with you and trust that you will do what you need to do with it. And if you don't want it, you will tell me and I can ask you and let's just put it out there in the table for us to choose and figure this out together.
And what does that therefore, or can that look like in your work, Nishi?
Yeah. So often it's always what I can do with you in sort of going, hey, look, this thing's popping into my head and maybe it's nothing or maybe it's something, I don't know. And just offering it to them and inviting them to consider it if they want to. And if they're like, oh no, actually that's nothing, I don't really want to talk about that, fine, whatever. Um, but rather than them trying to go on to the next topic whilst thinking about what I was thinking about, it just like that distracts them from doing the explorations that might be useful to them. And so it's if there's some things that will pop into my head that I can just let go of, but some things just really hold my attention, right? And it was like that word, that detachment word, like it catches my attention. And so if it's catching my attention, that could be useful to someone. Put it out there, let them see, let them choose, and trust them to choose whatever is right for them. Does that give you what you were looking for there?
Yeah, I feel it does. The thing that really stood out for me is um, the trusting in the client, but also I suppose, and one of the ICF competencies around MCC is talking about trusting almost in the process more than we trust ourselves, and it does feel like that almost. I suppose surrender to what is emerging with us together. Um,
Yeah. And be mindful not to overwhelm the space with my stuff.
mm,
And I had to learn to do that. Because if you're having a great conversation, they're telling you all this stuff. Like your mind's going, you're exploring things, you're thinking about things, it's making connections for you. It's there for me. Like it's an array of stuff. And I think prior to the MCC journey, I had a tendency to drop more of that stuff into the space and not leave enough space for my clients' thinking. And again, not to knock that work because it did some great stuff. But now to create more space for them to work through things. And yet I'm sat here in this conversation noticing, am I giving you enough space? Just, but knowing that I'm not in a coaching conversation, but like it's there now in our conversation.
And also, there's a funny thing there. I think I mentioned this in my interview with Anise Frost, which is the last interview I did as well, that I find it easy to not slip into, but be almost coach mode-ish in all conversations, because and also sometimes it can feel more comfortable for me to listen and not to speak. And it's funny that we're noticing that emerging here as well. So,
Yeah. And it's, oh gosh, I was on my usual morning walk today, and I was reflecting on some conversations this week and going, oh, I wasn't being in coach mode during those conversations. And it wasn't necessarily coach mode, but like I wasn't accessing that part of myself. And perhaps I was doing a disservice to those individuals in those moments. And in that reflection this morning, I was there going, gosh, look, you're capable of this stuff, you're good at it, you do it in coaching, it's brilliant. But perhaps you haven't embedded it far enough. So that in the moment, I can be in service of those people too, like not to ignore myself, but to access that resource that I have when I'm coaching and have access to it more often. And I think it's just highlighted me like the next step of this journey is to further embed so much of this, perhaps before I go on to discover anything new, if I'm really honest.
yeah, the sort of integration of that learning, and also what's really stood out is the depth both of experience and learning that you've gathered over the 10 years now that you've been doing this.
It's crazy to think it's been nearly 10 years. Goodness me. This comes from, and by the way, it comes from, how I say I've got that almost spotty movement. Like when I came into coaching, I thought it'd be for a few years if I was lucky before I got bored. And that I wouldn't, I just wouldn't, it would engage me because that's what I've experienced for a lot of my career. At the moment, I can't see myself doing anything else. And because there is still so much to develop and learn and grow, and there's so many different varieties of work that I can do, and many ideas I have for projects for myself or that I might want to do in partnership with other people, that for I'm always amazed that it's been that long and that I'm still this excited by coaching. That's always a bit of a wonder for me.
Hi everybody, Robbie here. I'm the creator of The Coach's Journey. If you like what you're hearing on this episode, the chances are you'll love An Introduction to the Coaching Business Flywheel. That's a free ebook available at thecoachesjourney.com. It's the most important piece of content I've ever created for coaches, boiling down everything I've learned from this show, from working with master coaches, and from my own experience into one simple model. The model not only tells you the only things you have to do to have a sustainable coaching business, but also shows you how they can form a virtuous circle that keeps your coaching business growing. It's all free, and you can find it at thecoachesjourney.com. And there's a link in the show notes. Now, back to the show.
Feels like it nicely moves us back to that. So when you quit your job to do the hypnotherapy training, the NLP as well, thinking that this might be a 2-year thing, what happened next, Nishe?
A lot of failure. A lot of falling over, a lot of learning, um, a lot of figuring out a bit more about me as a person. So, and to give that more structure, I was one of those people that wanted to have a business, and I was like really thinking about it, but didn't quite know what I want to do it. And I paid for a mentor that really didn't do what I probably needed it to do. But at the time, I was that person that was impulsive and just, signed up for stuff as I'd done before, which, by the way, kind of worked a lot. This one didn't. And, part of that was what they were offering. Part of that was the person I was at the time. And I'm glad I did it then, because now I'm a lot more able to think about what I do want before I engage or work with someone. But a lot of false starts in terms of what I thought I wanted my business to be, what coaching I would offer, this whole niche or not niche, and all of that stuff. And as you can hear from the conversation, like, I'm so interested in the practice of coaching. It's what calls to me, what I get excited by, but it's not what clients want to buy. And I get the difference in that they want to buy the results that they're looking for. And yet I'm not attached to that. So it was suddenly into a really interesting space, right? And I still grapple with this. But I started out wanting to do coaching for school leavers because I've worked in early careers. And then it moved over to, I developed an approach called Inner Selves, which builds on essentially sub-personalities or inner archetypes and that work. And then I moved into the NLP stuff. And when I built an NLP course. I ran it for 2 people. It works. It's great. It's just not the work I want to do. And it's just been this ongoing practice. And it was partway through that journey that I realized that I didn't really know what I wanted. And actually, perhaps the associate roles was probably a better approach for me. And I kind of resisted it because I thought I needed to have my own coaching practice to be to have a business. And it's almost like this perception that if I was taking associate roles and working through other organizations, I didn't really have a coaching business, which is odd given the setup I now have. And over time, I've worked through a few different organizations. And for me, the associate roles work really well. They give me access to clients I possibly never would have worked with. They work in lots of different ways, so I'm having to operate differently as a coach, so it keeps my practice up really well. I get to work with people on such a variety of topics, and where they're in lots of different situations themselves. It like even the training, facilitation, and mentoring, I get that breadth of opportunity and work through these organizations. So I'm incredibly lucky to have that. Um, and it's only now that I'm going, well, I think I feel a sense of what I want to create. Whereas I think early days, I was doing it because I had to earn the money. And I was desperately trying to find the thing that would earn me the money. Whereas now, I'm like, what am I excited about? What do I want to do? What would I like to bring? And that's what I'm looking to create. And I'm not attaching money to that for the first time, because the associate roles and the other work I've got would take care of it. And I'm not earning mega money. I'm really not. What I am doing, a friend of mine said that she called it a lifestyle business. And I'm like, yeah, that probably really does describe it. The business is there to afford me the lifestyle that I get to lead. And that is, as I continue to shift and change it, and it will continue to evolve, the type of life I want to lead is a primary factor in what I now choose to do. Sorry, that was a bit of a higgledy-piggle. I feel like I'm checking myself, going, oh, it's higgledy-piggledy. We're going in different directions. I'll go hand over to you and see where we go next.
Well, actually, and I feel like it's a good illustration of any coach's journey into coaching, and also some drilling has started next door, so actually perfectly timed. But if the drilling continues and you can't hear me, do say, because that I have no idea. So yeah,
We can't hear it at all, by the way. So
well, yeah, let's see if it does come up. Just mention, yeah. I love that the meta narratives that podcasts will have as well. But yeah, here in the studio there is some drilling going on. No, so yeah, I'm thinking back to that journey you described of now through the associate work and the accumulation of all you've done, noticing what it is you might want to create. I don't know why it reminds me of there's a friend often talked about, lots of people want to write a book, but fewer people have something to say, and they can both be true at the same time, I think. And it feels like it's through the passage of time and gathering of experience and that real depth of experience that it's emerged, but also you've allowed to create the conditions for that so that you can create, knowing that the life you want to live is also still being sustained and doesn't rely on the business to make the money you need to have the life.
Yeah, I will caveat that and saying it does for now. And it's also this real recognition that because I am an associate, that I am reliant on these organizations giving me work. And I'm lucky because I go through a few different organizations. So if somebody wasn't able to give me work or they chose not to or what have you, I've got the others. But I am reliant on them. In the same way someone with a job is reliant on the organization as well. And so some of it does afford me this beautiful lifestyle, but I also am regularly monitoring the sector, monitoring what's impacting it, noticing what's happening globally, and starting to go, well, like, how is this playing out in organizations? How is this playing out in terms of governments? Because an organization I work for has got government funding, and I'm sort of there going, well, I've somehow managed to get associate roles where each of the organizations I work with is funded slightly differently, which I'd never really consciously thought about, but I'm very grateful for. But I am reliant on them in some ways. And so there is a want within me to create that stream. But at this point, as we've said, I don't have to attach the money to it yet. I would charge for it, but I just don't. It doesn't have to make a lot of money, and so I've got space to grow that over a period of time, while I know I've got that level of financial security from these other roles that I have.
And my sense is often that associate things are seen as like golden eggs, few and far between, and so that is in some ways true in some cases. And I'll be curious to hear what you notice in that sort of stepping back and looking at the wider landscape of things. But how have those associate things come about, Nishe?
For someone who doesn't feel like I had a good network and I wasn't great at relationships in some ways, a number of them came from referrals and conversations or the initial reference to them. So the first one was someone's like, hey, so-and-so's hiring. If you're interested, you might want to think about it. And I was like, okay, great. Because I'd say to people, I'm like, thinking about it. So, they're turning around and go, well, what about this opportunity? Or someone's interacted with me and they've gone, what about Nishe for this role? And that's not to say that these just suddenly land in my lap. I went through interview processes, conversations. I've made direct applications and then followed those through. I have been declined. I have been said, people have said no to me, and that's absolutely true and right too. And so it isn't like us. They saw that I was doing what I was doing, tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, here's this opportunity." I went through those processes, and I think what helped in some ways was that there was some that I wanted, and when I did want them, I did do as well. If I'm really honest, when I went in there going, actually, I'd like to discover a bit more about what this is and what this could be. Actually, I showed up in a way that was engaged in this being a two-way process, a bit like any other recruitment process, if I'm really honest. And given how many jobs I've had in the past and how much I've bounced around, it probably set me up for those and to have the resilience to also reapply. And I learned that from someone really early on, probably from my first associate role, where they said that they'd reapplied for that opportunity. And I was like, oh, wait a second. No, just because someone says no once doesn't mean that's no forever. Um, and so I have reapplied to organizations, and sometimes that's worked out, sometimes it hasn't. But I'm always on the lookout. I'm always keeping my ear to the ground, not because I've got the capacity for it, if I'm really honest at this point, but I know that I might not have these. I know that it's not something that I could have in maybe a couple of years' time. As much as I would love it to stick around, I think I would love to continue these roles because they all fuel me and I enjoy them all for many different reasons. I can't say if we just don't know. And so I always keep my ear to the ground a little bit.
And that makes me, and you touched on it a little bit, Nishi. How, I suppose, do you balance the what you're doing now with the looking ahead, and that, I mean, over the 10 years, it really sounds like what you do and how you do it has evolved.
I think it is that thing about I'm just always looking, hearing what people are saying, seeing how the market's evolving. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not doing any in-depth analysis. I'm just observing, listening, asking people about what they're doing, how things are evolving for them. Um, and like for a while there, I was there going, would internal coaching take over? But look, there's a place for it and it's valuable, but actually there seems to be more of a movement to leaders as coaches or managers as coaches, and coaching really still being a huge role for corporations, but they're finding other ways to bring it into the workplace. And so internal coaches is one route, but there's some growth in that space from what I'm seeing. And like, I'm not in there, so there'll be people who are more in that space who will get a better feel for that market. So I see some opportunities there, but I'm also there going, some of those get built by people who are already in the organization who then train as coaches and then build out a function as well, right? Like, it's some of those roles never get put out there. All those opportunities just evolve naturally within an organization. But I'm kind of going, well, where is the industry and sector of coaching going? And I see the AI stuff coming in. I'm like, I've got to keep an eye on this because I haven't gone, like, I think initially I was like really excited by it. And then I just went, that's not me yet. And maybe I'll get left behind on that route. I don't know, but it's just not calling to me yet. But there is a growing space there. And it's just seeing how people are engaging coaching and how it's evolving as a practice, I think, as well. And I guess I do question that. It's like, what is the next evolution of coaching as a practice? You could turn around and go, it's AI, but AI has almost been built along the current practices of coaching. And so like, what is next? And what will we create in coaching that isn't there currently? Will it still be called coaching? Will it be something else? I don't know. But I like thinking about this stuff. I like exploring this stuff and seeing what people are thinking about it. I guess I'm going. You invite me to ask you as well, and I'm kind of there. Go, what are you seeing in the sector? What are you noticing? Because I'm kind of there. Go, there's always this bubbling in the sector. There's always something. But I'm intrigued by it all.
Yeah, and yeah, you've got me intrigued as well, Nishe, both in terms of, and yeah, I can share what I'm seeing, and also would love to hear a bit more about how you've seen that evolution play out over the last decade or so. And it's really funny you kind of putting that question back on me, because the issue one's like, how do I know? How would I know? I've but I also know that's not wholly true, and probably is not true for any coach who's even done it for a bit of time. Because my sense is that, well, I'll always have a bias that there's probably fewer coaches in the world than I think there are, because I am surrounded by more coaches. But also feels like it's being both known better and almost more misappropriated as a term. And I think there'll be an effect, and I think AI will contribute to that, in the sense of people will access AI coaches and they'll probably be very directive. And I think Sam Isaacson talks about this in an interview Neil did with him on the coach's journey. And that's partly because people won't know to coach me non-directively. They'll just ask the AI to coach them. But I think that still will be valuable for some people in the same way that directive coaching is. There'll also be people that will experience coaching that isn't coaching, and that will initially perhaps be frustrating and cause them not to come back to coaching for some time. But I feel that there's enough good work going on, and in more spaces than coaching was happening in before, that slowly more and more people will know about it. I think have no historical kind of data to back this up, but my sense is coaching feels like it's going through the thing that therapy did maybe 20, 30 years ago, in that people more openly will talk about accessing therapy, and also it is more accessible for people who aren't significantly high income as well, and it's not just provided through work. And so not only is it normalized, but it's just more readily available and valued. And I think the tension with coaching at the moment is people not necessarily knowing what its value might be, and also because lots of coaching is sold on helping people get results, which is always this tension of I mean, when we talk, kind of touch on this concept, we can't ever promise results through coaching, and that's not really what it's about. And yeah, 9 times out of 10, when people look to buy something, they're looking for the thing to give them something. And I think, at least with therapy, there's probably enough of an understanding to go, this might at least help me deal with these things that are difficult, whereas I don't actually know what coaching might do, or actually probably will help me deal with these things that are difficult, but it's like, but that's therapy, isn't it? And so and I think, well, going from I don't know, clearly I've got many thoughts on it, Nishe. So yeah, I appreciate you asking. And I think more broadly, that sense of I think that coaching offers a space for people to be seen and witnessed, and to be more of who they want to be outside of the coaching space, in a way that AI won't do well enough for long enough. And I think people can challenge me on that and say, well, actually, no, because AI is getting to the point that, it feels like you're interacting with another conscious being. But I think that, well, I might be optimistic. My sense is will our craving for human connection will only increase. And actually, that's where coaches might play a role.
It's so like I sit in that I don't know, if I'm really honest. Like even with people not really experiencing coaching, but they experience something that helped them, that they refer to as coaching, and I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing. And I always I constantly grapple with this, like I don't like the term, but I often go, "Oh, the purist coaching," but it's not purist coaching; it's just coaching, and us holding that in a certain regard. And when, as a coach, we're retraining this, we put the effort and the energy into developing the skill and this way of being, that it can feel like other people who are doing something, calling it coaching, is not respecting the work that we do, or it's, they're not doing this in the way that they perhaps should. And I guess I question that within myself, and I've sort of like I I think over time I've gone, well, if they're helping people, genuinely helping them, and they're not creating the problem within the person, or they're not harming them, but they are genuinely helping them, should I be dismissive of them, or should I look to understand what it is they're doing and perhaps discover what they're doing and how it might be useful to my clients and develop that practice? And that's, like, let's be really clear, there are people out there who are doing things that that is harmful, that is overly challenging, that is not coaching, but also is detrimental potentially to their clients. Um, I don't agree with that at all. But I kind of go, so who created coaching? And did they work to these frameworks when they were coaching? And how did they do this? And who's to say that they got it right? Just because we've bought into this concept, does that mean that that's the best approach for people? And we're almost seeing in coaching that there's this, in my mind, what I'm starting to hear more about, this coaching mentoring combination that seems to be coming through more in the sector and more acknowledged. We know MCC already acknowledge it, but I'm hearing that more and more. I'm like, well, wait a second here. Like, we're okay to do that, but we're not okay to do this other thing over here that's getting results and really helping. Wait a second. If we're really coaches, like, aren't we meant to be non-judgmental in that discovery and ourselves? And I'm not saying we don't judge and evaluate in that sense, but are we truly able to be non-judgmental if we can't step into that space and just observe and notice? And so, yeah, look, not to knock what you're saying, because I get it, and I have these thoughts and going, well, wait a second, are they really experiencing coaching? And if they experience coaching, could they have gotten different and better results? But also the part of me that goes, hey, but is there something there that could be really valuable? And are we dismissing it because we've been taught something in particular? And I don't know. And I could be wrong to even consider that, but I can also go, you know, is it wrong that people don't experience this coaching in the way that it can be? I don't know if it is wrong, but I would love for people to know what coaching can be, and for them to be able to choose to experience that, or to be able to work with a practitioner so that they can turn up and go, hey, today, this is what I need. And I'd like you to maybe not coach me, but to step into this other space. Can we do that today? And I think that's what I want to really get into more and more. And I don't know if I will train therapeutically, or as a therapist. I don't think that's it's not there for me at the moment. That I can offer a bunch of different ways of working, and some of them will be more coaching than others. But who am I to tell a client that they should be being coached?
Yeah, what really resonates there is the I suppose almost how do we take a coaching approach to all of that, which is what can we learn when we're not bringing judgment, and that what feels right for us as well from that. Um and also I'm reminded that how I like to think about coaching more now is as a partnership, and it feels, as someone who I realize appreciates having some element of structure, it can be unhelpful because I'll go, oh, was I really coaching that person then? But actually, have I asked that person what will be most valuable with the space we have today? Because that's the partnership that they're looking for. And there might be times where I go, well, maybe this, well, I can't help create the space that you are needing now, and that's fine. But that's been done in partnership, and arguably is coaching in some ways, and it's in what it intends to be. If we're thinking about enabling people to be what they want to be.
So interesting, isn't it? It's I grapple with that question: am I coaching? A lot. It's like a continuous thing that I'm asking myself, and sometimes I'll go, well, no, you weren't. You were doing this, because I'm holding that definition of coaching. And sometimes go, well, no, you were coaching, because coaching can incorporate that. And I can't decide how I want to hold it, even if I'm really honest. But an acknowledgement that it is different to how it's defined by some people. And let's not make it not coaching. It just is not coaching in that particular definition. And it could be something else, but it could equally be coaching.
And
yeah, I grappled a lot. Sorry, I was just going to say, I just constantly grapple with this because in the variety of my practice and the different modalities.
I also think it's hopefully a reassuring thing for people to hear, that I think it's an ongoing question. Maybe it's a good sign, because it's us being curious of how we ensuring that we're doing the best we can, or offering the best service doesn't quite feel like the right words. But there's also, again, it feels like we're coming back to trust, that the people who will really need what we offer will find us, and there's stuff we can do. It's not just sit back but knowing that, and also trusting when it doesn't feel right.
Yeah, completely. Just it's hard not to get too attached to some of these things, especially as the structures and the definitions get more and more refined. And look, you talk like literally going through that MCC process, right? Like I'm questioning it and still moving through it because I can see the potential and the value of that. I'm also recognizing it's one aspect, and I guess alongside that structures and definitions and so forth, I always get struck by things like the core competencies we have. So I know ICF have them, EMCC, AC, and I'm sure a lot of the other bodies have them as well. Those are the three that I've just interacted with most. What I recognize, though, is that they refer to them as core competencies. They are the central competencies, and they are behavioral competencies. They do not encompass every aspect of coaching, but they are a really great solid starting point. And they often, and I'm more obviously aligned to ICF just because that's the route that I've gone down, and I see the value of that for me still now. But they evolve, they rework these, they keep shifting and changing them. Great. And I just kind of go, they also give you minimum standards. And so there's an acknowledgement that these are the basics of what we expect at these levels in terms of these core competencies, but there's a whole world beyond this. And it's almost built in, but we can get too attached going, that's because it is thought of as the gold standard, to go, once you've done that, that's enough. And I'm of the practice of that, yeah, that's your start point. Where do you want to go next? And what's going to help you to start moving into the space that you want to go? So Love the structures. I think they're brilliant. I think they're supportive. Even with the NLP, great structures. Great to get my head around those processes and those models and those the containers and so forth. They are the start point.
Yeah.
And I think the risk is that we get too attached to them being more than the start point.
I really like this. Feels like the distinction I'm making now is that those core competencies, whichever ones you want to align yourself to, are the foundations upon which you build, not the walls that surround you.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, I like that. That's exactly it, right? And you're so right. That's it. They're the foundations.
And Nishi, you mentioned your MCC journey a few times. Yeah, tell me more about what that means and has involved so far.
Yeah. So, gosh, when did I start this? I started this journey. By the way, for anyone who's listening to this does not need to be your journey. I've been doing this for 2.5 years now. I remember starting it at a point where I was about a year and a half away from renewal for my PCC, and going, I definitely don't have the hours. Like, there's no way I wouldn't have the hours in terms of coaching practice to go for my MCC at that point. So it would probably be the 3 years after that I would go for it. But it felt like the right point for me to start looking at my next level of learning, my next discovery. And I was intrigued by it because I'd met MCC coaches and I was like, I'm not getting what makes you different to me. And I don't know why I thought I would suddenly see it through an interaction. I had no idea. But at that point, that comparison, I was just going, I don't get it. I don't get what this MCC thing is. It was almost like hidden away in some ways, but it wasn't. It like ICF, they shared their minimum requirements. You could see the standards and so forth. But I was like, I don't get it. I don't get what this thing is. And so I went into this journey not to become MCC, but to discover what I didn't yet know. And boy, oh boy, was there a lot of discovery. It was, and everyone does it differently. And I think most people talk about it being transformative. I don't think it necessarily has to be. It depends how you want to approach it. It can be just developing a bit of extra skill, I think. But I wanted to go on a deeper learning journey as well. And I was lucky enough to connect with a mentor who has offered that to me. And I'm so grateful to them because we had one-to-one sessions. I attend one-to-one sessions with them, and then I continue with them. I'm in a bit of a group program with them at the moment. But I remember turning up to these sessions and us exploring something, and I'd be like, "But I don't get that. Like, what am I not getting here?" And this cognitive trying to understand it and getting frustrated, and then cognitively understanding it, then not being able to implement because I had it embedded within me, and having such um having such challenging time and receiving feedback on my coaching, having someone listen to my coaching, which I hadn't done for a while. Um, and, the frustration, the angst, and so forth. And there were tears. Like it was, um, I loved the learning. I hated it. I could not have been happier with the journey I got to go on as part of this. And it set a new standard to the type of learning I want to do and what I want to invest in for myself. It was bringing into practice things that hadn't been as part of my coaching, like simple things like appreciating my client and openly and directly and genuinely and concisely appreciating them and their work. And it's built into the competencies, but it's just something that hadn't evolved into my practice. And I didn't quite get the value of until I started doing to in this very fluid way and suddenly going, oh, this stuff has a huge impact on people. It's not just the work they do and the discoveries they make and the actions, but having someone go, yeah, I can see this in you. This is amazing. what are you discovering in yourself? And so there were just little things that I started in my practice. My curiosity got stronger. My presence and was built on that patience we talked about before. Um, I then took a bit of a break. I was in that journey for about a year and a bit, and I had my op last year, and so everything shut down at that point. And I was like, right, don't have space for capacity for MCC, don't have space for capacity for anything. And I almost needed to have that op in the recovery of that to access something else within me that then allowed me to crack the code on what MCC was for me. Like, if I'd kept working it, kept going for it, it just wasn't going to happen. The fact that I was so completely dependent on other people for a short period of time that I had to discover how to move my body differently again. Like, I learn to walk differently, and and having to accept that if I didn't eat at certain points, I would stop functioning properly, and having to go right back to basics as a human, right back to you know, just functioning through the day, allowed me to sit back and not expect so much from myself. That allowed me to then sit back and not expect from the clients in a different way. And so this whole journey with MCC was, yes, there was a lot of learning discovery about the competencies and developing and how I utilize them. But there was so much about who I am as a person and how that then shows up in my coaching, and life experiences I had that fed into that awareness and that deeper embedding and connection within me that then allowed it to show up in my coaching for me to now think about my coaching going, okay, not I remember going through that process and listening to my recordings going, I don't get what I'm not doing here. And my mentor saying, well, this, and this. And I'm like, I don't get it. Like, I think I am doing that. What's going on here? To now being able to so clearly hear it and notice that sense within me when I know that I'm not in that space that just didn't exist in that first year and a bit where I was doing my MCC journey. It really came together partway through last year, towards the end of last year, and just I felt the difference. And I always said to myself that I would never apply for my MCC until I felt it and I knew that I was at that level, knowing that my assessor might disagree, and that's cool. Like, they might see it differently, not a problem. But I knew within myself that getting my MCC was not the aim. It was this unlocking a different part of my approach was so much more important to me. And there were times where I was like, why have I not submitted yet? Because it started to creep in as I got closer and closer to it. But I'm so grateful that I started with the mindset I started and had myself over for that learning, because it meant that I just was ready to discover. And I think it's impacted the coach I've been able to become because I wasn't attached to getting my MCC. Like, my renewal's not till the end of next year. So it's, yeah, tough old journey. Not the same journey for everyone. Everyone will do this differently, I would hope. And because everyone's a unique coach, by the time they get there, will become the unique coach as they continue. But it kicked my butt. And I really, on some level, really enjoyed it. And yeah, like I said, set the standard for the learning I want now going forward.
Yeah, thanks, Nishe. And you mentioned in that the period you stepped away from coaching as well, and when you had the operation. I'm curious what you noticed and how that was, I suppose, also from the perspective of running a business. Am I right in thinking you did no coaching kind of work for 5 weeks?
Yeah, like, so I had I did have my op through the NHS. I'm again very grateful for the NHS for the support I've had. and the continued support I have. And so it was about 9 months before the surgery that we'd agreed that I would have the surgery. So it took 9 months for it to happen. But there's no set date. With the NHS, you get 6 weeks notice. And so you've got a sense of when you might be taking that time off, but you don't know. And so I had to plan to be off work with no clients for 5 weeks and have a kind of start date of when that would happen. So you're probably talking about me planning to be off work for more like 5 to 8 weeks potentially. And because I'm an associate, it's very different to having your private practice. So I could have said to my private clients, "Hey, look, I'm going to be off for this period of time. Um, I'll let you know as soon as I know. We'll get you in for sessions, and we can manage that through if that's okay." You know, you'd have the agreements and so set up. Associate work, that's not how it works. So for one of my roles, I stopped taking on new clients around February. So I didn't have coaching clients for them for a number of months. For another role, I had to bring someone in to cover my work, and they have then continued with us. And I had to hand over to them about 6 weeks before the op so that clients had continuity with their coach. And so what was meant to be about 5 weeks is actually a lot longer of no coaching work. And so that's why I'm grateful to have had mentoring and facilitation and so forth, because they're set dates or they're a bit more flexible. And it was scary because I was there going, oh, I'm earning an okay, like I'm earning a nice amount and I'm comfortable and this is great. But the daft thoughts you have go over your head. What if I don't get clients come back? What if, it takes a while for the clients start booking in with me again? Um, w- this is the one, and I can't believe I'm saying this out loud, but what if they like this other coach more than me and when they're covering my role? They've worked with me for years. It wasn't going to be they liked them more than me. It was always we would continue with both. But and I go, what if the business that I've built suddenly stops working? And also knowing that after the op, I did a phased return because I was still in recovery. Like a full recovery came this year. So it's about 6 months I got to full recovery. They say it can take up to a year. And so I knew that I was also coming back with shorter days and not all days because I needed to rest and I need to be moving around and so forth. So sorry, that's my tummy growling. I do apologise for everyone. It's going a bit crazy. Um, but also taught me how quickly business work can come back. And I said I always keep my ear to the ground. It's part of that as well. Is if I need to take time off, those other organisations still need to continue. And it's that as much as I've got really good relationships with them, they have to continue as businesses. And so I have to admit, I was very lucky in that I think I only in the end lost about half a month's earnings due to the off, which is a bit of a miracle. So obviously my earnings went up, but then it balanced off overall. So I've earned a similar amount this financial year as I did the financial year before it, which gives me confidence taking time off to look after my health and so forth. And if I take 5 weeks off for an op, I am more than willing to take off more time for holidays because that's the other thing. I'm not being paid in that time. So you almost go, oh, is it okay for me to take that time off? I'm like, yeah, I'm getting more confident that it's okay for me to take more time off. It's okay for me to shut up shop for a bit and do what I want to do or take care of myself and my health. But that year going up to that point was scary. because there was every possibility that that could extend for another 3 or 4 months afterwards to get back up to the levels that I would be comfortable with. Yeah, this year happened and that kicked my butt. So I went from famine to feast very quickly, and that was a bit scary. To uh, it's it was a lot of planning, a lot of constantly calling my consultant secretary, going, "Do we have a date? Am I still on the list? Do we have a sense of what's going on?" Keeping in contact with the different organisations I work with and going, "Well, I think it's around this. Let's start planning. Are you happy for me to do this? Are we agreeing these dates? And this is what I'm thinking about," and staying in contact with all of them. So managing those relationships and make sure not only the clients were taken care of, but I was make sure my relationships with those organisations was well managed. Um, and then switching off the computer at the end, like before I went to the op and just going, right, I did turn on my laptop for, I think it was about 3 weeks in the end. I Yes, I kept in touch, stayed on top of things through my phone, but I did not turn on my laptop for about 3 weeks. And I don't think I've done that since like my 30s, my early 30s. And so I feel like I'm just saying the same stuff. Challenging to make that decision to do it. But I think I keep saying I'm lucky. I think I got lucky in the dates and how it all worked out in the end. And it's kind of given me the confidence. Well, and I know that I'm in my lifetime, like the knee will need at least another couple of ops. I think I need another major op, that I feel confident that the business is in a good enough place now to survive those things. I just don't want to do it too often because that's not great practice. It's not great for my health.
Yeah, thank you, Nishi. I mean, while it's one of those cliches, it really strikes me that there's an element of, you mentioned luck, but the things you kind of did to create that luck are both like, the associate stuff and the ongoing associate stuff has to be a product of you doing good work, but then also how you manage those relationships. And I imagine there's two risks, right, in trying to rush back too quickly, and actually that kind of being to the detriment of not just yourself but the business. And it also it makes me think that sometimes we have to do the things that it sounded, because I had two, I don't know if I can do this, which is take the 5 weeks off, but also then to restart as well, and with the kind of the amount of work that came through. And yeah, sometimes having to do it proves other things, or teaches us that, because now it sounds like maybe we'll talk in a year's time and you're going to take a 5-week holiday.
You know what? I think it's actually possible. I feel more confident that I could do these longer breaks. I'd have to be thoughtful. I think I'd probably have to adjust my work to be able to do it more consistently. But also that piece around, can I take all that time off that you said? I was there going, my consultant went, "You're going to need 3 months off." I was like, well, that's not happening. No one who has their own business is going to take 3 months off, particularly if you're the only person bringing in the money. Um, and I was like, I could do 3. I reckon 3 weeks will be enough. And I'm so glad I did 5, because at the end of week 3, I could have gone back to work gradually. I think I could have done it, and I would have been okay. But those extra 2 weeks allowed me to come back to being more me. I think I would have gone back and I would have functioned well and I would have done a good job. Those extra 2 weeks created some kind of ease that I don't think I would have discovered if I hadn't just given myself that extra space. Yeah.
Yeah. Nishi, I'm mindful that we'll be entering sort of the last part of our conversation today, despite the fact there's still many threads that I'd love to pull. But what haven't we touched on yet that it feels like you'd really like to touch on?
I think it's just more just finishing off that piece around where I'm almost going, maybe. Um, and so I think, and it kind of pulls together obviously everything that I've done up until this point. What I recognize within myself, what is making such a huge difference to my practice, and I think we can hear it through how I've been talking, is the growth within me as a person and the influence that has in terms of what I see and notice, how I show up and how I interact. And that's the stuff, it's almost what we refer to as the coaching mindset piece. I think that's the stuff I really want to help people discover and embed further so that the simplicity of the coaching skill has a chance to just really shine. And I guess, how do I describe it? One of the ways that I sometimes talk about it is, you know, how we talk about coaches being curious, and that's a fundamental, like, the curiosity of a coach. What I want to explore further, not only my own practice, but perhaps how I support other people's development, is like, what is that curiosity? Like, what is that curiosity focused on? Where does that curiosity come from within you? What is that experience of curiosity? Like, saying we're curious, well, what is that? And really taking the time to help people discover and connect to what that is for them, how they continue to grow it, how they experience it, and listening to how other people experience it, and to continue that growth from within. And the reason, and I was like, they go, well, that's part of my journey and that feels like it's useful. But it's also, they go, well, isn't that what we do as coaches? Like, we do that transformative work from within the person. We coach the person, not the problem. Yet when we train or develop coaches, we're often focusing on what they're doing because that's what we see and we interact with. And it's really relevant. It's really useful. And I recognize it in my own practice how powerful that is. But I'm also going, where do people go to discover and embed those experiences within themselves and grow those a bit further? And if we invest in that, what difference does that start to make? So this playing with those ideas, and I'm recognizing how it now filters through my work anyway, quite naturally. Kind of going, like, how do people actually experience curiosity? Like, what is that like? Um, I don't know. Like, that's just one component. Like, there's a bunch of them, right? But yeah, that's kind of where I'm heading. If people want to have a chat with me about that at some point, let me know, because I'm kind of curious to see, like, what's out there, and what people are thinking about this stuff as well. And kind of, guys, I know I keep going, hey, what do you think? But like, what do you think about that inner work and that being something that supports? And if you feel there is a space for that in terms of helping coaches to develop in their practice. And I feel like I've led you on that one, but we're not in coaching, so I'm just going to leave it there.
Yeah. Great question again, Nishi. And first, you reminded of, not reminded fully enough, there's an excellent episode that Neil did, and I cannot. Oh, it's with Shruti. Can't remember her surname at the moment. Who talks a lot about the inner work as the, because there's a value to coaches, because almost always we're the ones that get in the way of our businesses. But in the same way, I think, that's broadly true, isn't it? We often get in our own way in life, and I also think there's a tension in, well, because we're not advising. It's not so much do as I say, not as I do, but that we can be focused on doing the work of coaching almost to the detriment of applying that work to ourselves. But because it really does require commitment and space sometimes, not always. There are practices that we can obviously do consistently. But I feel that certainly that in my experience, there are real ebbs and flows. Like, I noticed that this year I'm doing more learning and training than I've done since I really qualified as a coach, and that feels really important, and not necessarily just for me as a coach. And I think they're always going to be indistinguishable, and that I think is interesting. And I think, and it really is like cultivating that curiosity, isn't it? And I think what I noticed too is, where are the things that as people we can kind of show ourselves new ways of being that can enable us as coaches, which is all part of the inner work. So a long-winded way of saying, and I've probably got a occupational bias, but I think that the inner work is almost always of value, but at times requires more than just ourselves to navigate it and to really turn that curiosity and to be how.
Yeah, I think it's hard, isn't it? Like, there's something about doing coaching that's so appealing. And I don't know if I understood what it was to be a coach until more recently, even though I was told that's what I needed to do. It's growing as a coach is fascinating, and I think we all do it in different ways. And I think I'm wanting now to discover more about how other people learn and discover and grow as coaches as well, and see what comes from within them. And I expect that will grow my practice as well. Right. I really do apologise. I've now got the lawnmowers outside, so if you can hear that, hopefully it's not getting to you.
Yeah, it's not coming through, and I think that'll be this beautiful bit that listeners will hear the suggestion of all these sounds that just next time we'll need props to make the sound effects a little bit, but well, and you mentioned it, but to make that explicit, anyone listening who's curious about curiosity or like curious to share how they grow and develop as coaches, we'll put Nishi's details in the show notes. So please do get in touch. And having been a listener that's got in touch with guests before, it really is a great experience. So I'd encourage it.
And by the way, like I'm open to conversation. I kind of like I'm not currently in a learning program apart from like ending up concluding my mentoring. So these kinds of conversations really fuel me. I get really excited to hear about people's journeys too. So, which aligns with this podcast beautifully.
Before we close this year, it feels like we've touched on lots of things that are going to be really enriching for coaches, both in their practice but their business. But if there were any bits of advice or things you wish you'd known starting out, what would they be?
I guess. Oh goodness, what I wish I'd known started out. I wish I'd understood that there were so many different ways of coaching, so many different practices, so many different places coaching existed. I think when I came into it, I just assumed it was some people with their own businesses, and that's all it really was. And some people got to go into corporate places, some people got to work for other organisations, some people just work private clients. I wish I'd been more open to the opportunities when they came my way or when people mentioned things, and I said yes more. Just to expose myself to different practices in coaching, and that I perhaps been, and I was the person I was at that time, but I'd been more open to what coaching could be and how it could play out, rather trying to get it right all the time. And really, really develop the curiosity to experience my client's world. I wish I'd known that first, rather than just going, well, these are the questions, or this is how you do it. Like, what is their experience? How do you become curious and excited to know what they're going through, and how they play things forward and how their thinking operates and how that's different to your own. So I'm mumbling my way through this, but fundamentally, I wish I'd been more. I just got a greater level of interest and curiosity about the clients earlier and their experiences, and that I just said yes more when opportunities came along, rather than feeling they had to fit into a certain way of coaching, a certain way of holding my business. Um, yes, it led me to where I am today, but I could have had some other opportunities that I probably would have very much welcomed.
Yeah, say yes more. And Joey, one of the other hosts, often talks about golden threads, and it feels like a golden thread of this conversation. She is what could coaching be, and the possibilities of coaching. It's certainly the question I'm taking away. And yeah, it's been a real pleasure. I'm very mindful of time and running us as close to time as possible, because it feels like there's been so much to unpack and to explore. So yeah, really grateful, Nishe, for not only your time but your perspectives.
Thank you so much, and thanks for allowing space for my mind to just go where it went. And I know I can ramble on a bit, so I appreciate you giving me the space for that as well. Thank you.
No, it's been a total joy to meander and explore. So thank you, Nishe.
Hi everybody, Robbie here. I'm the creator of The Coach's Journey, and I've got just a few quick things to share with you before you go on to the rest of your day. If you loved this episode, I think you'll love my free ebook, An Introduction to the Coaching Business Flywheel, which you can get at thecoachesjourney.com. It's my attempt to boil everything I've learned from my years supporting, coaching, and interviewing coaches about their businesses on this show into one simple model containing the fundamentals of any sustainable coaching business. These are the only things you have to do to have a sustainable coaching business, and the things that if you don't do them, you can't have a sustainable coaching business. And you can get it, again, for free at thecoachesjourney.com. And if you want to go deeper, you can find out more about my work with coaches there too, whether that's through a 12-month group coaching experience, or you can reach out to me directly via that website or via robbieswale.com to speak to me about one-to-one support. Thanks for listening, and we hope to have you back with us on the Coach's Journey podcast sometime soon.